Hey, welcome back to another episode of The Morning Walk. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you've been able to enjoy my other episodes that have really dove into other topics that are really, I think, necessary for you to change and to grow and to really expand your mindset on what is possible. As a recap from the last episode, we're in a series, sort of the 4 steps to lasting change, or so I call them. The previous episode, we talked about awareness. Awareness is always step number 1 when it comes to changing. And awareness can be broken down into 2 categories. The first one being, am I aware of the thoughts and the values and the beliefs that I hold that are going against what I actually am not doing? I can't be aware of something negatively affecting my life if I don't have values or beliefs that it's kind of rubbing against, that it's going against. And then it's being aware of my actual thoughts, of my actual behaviors that are going against it, that are negatively impacting my life, or that are not steering me in the direction that my values and beliefs and thoughts may want to go in that direction. So that's a recap. If you want more information about that episode, feel free to listen to it. And this episode is all about step number 2, curiosity. Curiosity is really important when it comes to wanting to change anything. I call this step the researcher. I want to research why my thoughts are popping up in certain situations, how they're impacting my behaviors, what triggers are actually making those thoughts come up, making those neurons fire, what's actually going on behind the scenes in my brain. And this episode is titled, Curiosity Did Not Kill the Cat, Stagnation Did. And I named it that because I don't think curiosity is a bad thing. In that statement, the curiosity kills the cat, it makes it assume, the assumption is that curiosity is a bad thing. When I don't think curiosity is the issue. I think stagnation in humans is the issue. Stagnation is almost this next step of feeling stuck, of being lazy. Stagnation is not only I'm stuck and I'm lazy, but I know what I ought to do and I'm not doing it. It's staying in a place where I don't want to be. And when humans get stuck in those places, we can really get down on ourselves. We can feel like we may never accomplish anything, that we may never be able to expand our horizons. And once we become aware of that, being curious as to how I got here, why I got here, what is it going to take to get me out of here, those are incredibly crucial things to think about. So step number 2 of the 4 steps is curiosity. And curiosity is incredibly crucial in development, especially as kids. Kids who are curious are learning all the time, and they're able to take that learning and apply it to whatever they want. And I think that's us returning to our childhood when we apply these steps. We're being aware of what we know and what we don't know and how it's impacting us. And then we're being aware of the questions behind it. We're getting curious of, why is that? How is that? What is that? Who is that? All of these questions that allow us to get curious. And I want to stop and take a moment to really address that change is hard. Internalizing some of these steps, especially step number 2 and 3, can actually take a long time. Some of these steps with some thoughts can be boom, 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 boom. Within 60 seconds, you can already be reassociating to a new positive spin on something. But some of these steps, they push us to a point where we may not have been. Emotionally, it can bring up certain things. I think of in the past, if you've been bullied or there's any trauma in your history, thinking about phrases of I'm not good enough or I'm not worthy, and those popping up into your brain, and then you getting curious about, well, where did that come from? And those images pop up. They can be incredibly hard to work through. And I think it's really important that if you find yourself being curious and being a researcher and feeling a lot of emotions come up, emotions that are scary or uncomfortable, find someone to talk to. Find a mentor, find a therapist, find someone to discuss those things with. When we get to discuss things in community, it releases this tension of I am bad and gives it to the community, gives it to that person to hold and to show you that you are not bad. Maybe what you're thinking is bad, but what you're thinking is not necessarily you. Again, your thoughts are not your identity. And again, change is very hard. But change is necessary for growth. Change is necessary for healing. Healing, quite literally, is a change in something moving in a positive direction. When our wounds heal, they change back into what they were before, or sometimes into scars. That's how it works. But sometimes we try and change by just ourselves. And it's in these moments that makes it even harder, because oftentimes we have these blinders on where we only see the world with certain perspectives, when if we were to go to someone else and talk to them and say, hey, here's what I'm dealing with, and here are my perspectives, they may throw a perspective on you that you weren't even thinking about. And we oftentimes can dictate and deceive our own self about what we're thinking or what the right path is, when someone else can come along and share wisdom, share insight that can actually help us be steered in the direction we need to go, the direction we ought to go. You know, life is always showing us things and pulling us in different ways. So many different directions. It can be difficult to actually know which direction it is to go. How should we grow? How should we change? And I think placing should in that category brings this almost heavier weight to it. It brings this guilt and shame of, well, I should do it because it's the right thing, you know. Or maybe I should do it because it is the right thing to do. And I think replacing should with ought is something that's even better. Because it's not only a should, it's not this, you know, damning statement, but ought gives freedom for me to go back to my first step of awareness and to say, what are my values and my beliefs around these things, around this growth, around this change? And what ought I do given those beliefs and values? It sets up this freedom to then say I ought to do it because it's what is needed of me. It's what's needed of my values. It's what's needed of my faith. It's what I ought to do. And if we bring someone alongside to walk with us and help us change our mindset and our behavior, it takes that pressure off of us. One thing I love about counseling, being on both sides of it, being the client and the counselor, is that our counselor gets to hold the hope for us in the room. That we can be whoever we want to be in the room. We can say whatever we want to say, and our counselor is always holding the hope for us. They're always holding the pressure. They're always holding the weight. And at the end of the session, they give it back, but somehow it always feels lighter. Because you were sitting in the presence of someone who genuinely cared, who genuinely sat and listened and provided insights and perspective that maybe you didn't have before. And that's an incredible thing to experience as a client, and an even more incredible thing to experience as a counselor when you get to walk through clients' change and see them grow so much. You know, one story I'll share is I had a client who came into counseling with suicidal ideation and depression. And after 5 sessions, she reported no suicidal ideation. And the work we were doing was really good. It was really deep. It was discussing her heartaches and issues. And we did an exercise where I asked her to bring in songs that could describe how she felt, because she couldn't verbalize how she felt about a certain situation. And she brought in a song by Ed Sheeran. And she played this song, and in that moment, it made her feel like she couldn't breathe, that all the oxygen was being taken out of the room whenever she saw this certain someone or was triggered by something. And the song was Save Myself by Ed Sheeran, and she felt like she couldn't save herself. Fast forward about 18 months later, it's our last session, and I ask her again to bring in a song that describes how she feels about her life now. And she plays a couple of songs, and then she plays the same Ed Sheeran song, Save Myself. And this time, she knew and mentions, well, I've always been giving so much of myself to other people that now I'm giving to myself. And I feel like I am saving myself. And I understand that I can give to people without losing myself. And it was almost this yin and yang, this positive and negative, that, I mean, it still gives me goosebumps right now, even talking about it, because it shows the weight of being able to bring someone alongside you, to get curious, to research where things are coming from, and to not even research, but to reassociate literal song meanings to different emotions in just 18 months. When we allow ourselves these vulnerability opportunities, our change accelerates faster than we ever could have thought. Because when we're in these moments of limiting mindsets and limiting beliefs and these negative thoughts, we can't see the future. We can't see that light at the end of the tunnel. And we need someone to come along with us to continue to hold the torch and show us that there is, in fact, a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's closer than we think. That's why getting a coach or a counselor or a mentor, or even in business or whatever you want to be doing, going to someone higher than you who's been there, who has already been on the climb, who is already where you want to be. They can share in the agony of the climb. They can share in their successes of the current, and they can also share in what they're dealing with and where they want to be. It's so incredibly crucial. And all of that begins with being curious of where is this coming from, what do I need to do about it, and who do I need to find to help me create a new perspective and to get me through these emotions, to walk me through these feelings. I think an action step for the curiosity is next time you find yourself being aware of those thoughts, being aware of what do I need, where is this coming from, write it down. Pull out your notes app in your phone. Carry a journal with you and write it down in that moment. Backtrack. Okay, I hadn't thought about this, about this, about this. I used to do this all the time with clients who used to have panic attacks. Clients with panic attacks would feel like they would just come on immediately and that there was nothing that triggered it. It just happened. When oftentimes it's a buildup. There's a thought that they had 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 120 minutes before that sets them up to when they get to a moment or get to that moment that they thought about, they then have the attack, and it does feel like it comes out of nowhere. And I'm not suggesting that that isn't a valid thought, but when we're not backtracking where those things are coming from, it can be hard to, in the moment, understand what happened, and then after the moment, we don't even want to think about anything that happened with that. And so an action step is just write it down. Write it down in the moment, backtrack, get curious. And even if you can't go in depth into it in that moment, set an alarm, do something that makes you want to come back to it later that day when you have time. Because again, growth is going to be paying attention to those details. It's going to be spending long hours figuring out what you need to change. The next episode, we'll be talking about detachment. This will be a bit more of a complex episode because we'll go into what detachment means, what it means to detach certain, thoughts and behaviors from your identity. Which ones do we know to detach and which ones are just maybe or should we keep? We're going to get into that in the next episode. But today we talked about curiosity, being the researcher of our thoughts, being the researcher of our life, being the researcher of your life. Understand that this is your life. No matter what, it is no one else's life. And because of that, don't live someone else's life. It's your life. So live it well. As always, thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you haven't already, go ahead and check out my website, keeganyork.com. On there, you can actually have a little bit of a cheat and get ahead in the 4 steps to lasting change. It's completely free to download. And on there, I also have my morning routine that I try to do every morning. I don't always accomplish it, I'll be honest. Like I miss things because I'm human, and that's okay. But thank you again for listening. I hope to see you on the next episode of The Morning Walk.